Morena, everybody. We'll declare the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting open. Very warm welcome to the committee, other councillors, staff and visitors. First of all, I do have to make this declaration, as we always do. I remind all present that the open session of this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and that recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Council, Regional Council website following this meeting. I also remind all present that the local government decision affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during the meeting that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Apologies, I think we're all present, and welcome Councillor Winters online.
Councillor Nees.
And Councillor Nees is also online. Welcome. And to those non-committee members, you're more than welcome to participate in the conversation. Public forum, we have none. Items not on the agenda, Mr. Taylor, we're all full. Just one comment I will make, you'll note in some of the items that we're actually reflecting back for the whole 3 years on all the issues that we have considered, all the work that's been done, the programs, etc. And I think that's very valuable when you do look back and see what's been achieved. Are there any declarations of interest?
Without it becoming a long list, I just wanted to reflect. We're looking at the annual report and I actually realised there were a couple of matters there that I have an incidental interest in. One of them is Regional Software Holdings Limited, for which there are quite a number of pages of SOI. I have now assumed the role of chair of that, so I don't think that it needs to be a problem. But actually I realised probably I should also declare that actually when we look at the group results, or as they come through, it does also include the port's 50% interest in Prime Port Timaru. I happen to be also the chair of Timaru District Council's Audit and Risk Committee, which owns TDHL, which owns those shares. So again, I say incidental, irrelevant ultimately in the long run, but I just want to be very clear about my interests, if that's okay.
Thank you, and I'm much the same with 8.3 with regard to all the figures around Quayside and their subsidiaries. And the narrative around that, so I'd like that recorded.
Likewise, Mr. Chair. Similarly for Quayside.
Other conflicts of interest? If not, we'll move on to public business be transferred, public excluded business be transferred in the open. At this point, there is none, although post this agenda, there may well be some items moved into the open, subject to the Chief Executive's assessment. So let's get straight into the minutes to be confirmed. They are of the 11th of June, therefore your consideration. Are there any questions, queries or corrections?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
Not thinking that.
To Andrew and Bruce. Is there any further debate? If not, I'll put that. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
So we'll now get into the reports proper. And the first one is the chairperson's report, which goes through again, quite a lot of work streams, but Matt will ask you to speak to that if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. So yeah, this chairperson's report highlights the work over the triennium achievements that are shown there on page 15 onwards. And it does highlight, as you said, Mr. Chair, the work programme of this committee and how that's contributed to the wider council achievements over the triennium. So they've been set out there in various financial matters, assurance, risk and other matters for this committee. And also the completed work programme, which completes the reporting of this committee at attachment 1, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that. Is there any commentary, questions or queries around those work streams or that report? Yep, Ron.
Without going into the specifics, but in terms of the Chairman's discretionary fund, it's normally limited to 5,000, but an exceptional. Sorry. Oh, I thought it was. Oh,
I have an answer for your query. Just on this report, is any questions or queries? If not, thank you for the team for putting that together. I'll move it be received. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Bruce. Further discussion? If not, I'll put that. All in favour, say aye. Against, carry. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. So now on to the chairman's discretionary report, and you're right, Councillor Scott. There is a number that's 6.5 from memory, but if you look at bullet point 2 on page 26, yeah, there is some discretion available.
That wasn't
was
my question.
exercised by both Fiona and
Yeah, that wasn't my question. It was about whether or not there's some criteria for the discretion. And that's why, the specifics not really. It's just what sort of criteria are considered in those circumstances.
I don't know if, Mr. Chair, you want to comment on the criteria that you use from time to time or have over the triennium and considering these matters, both these three, but the other ones that you've done over the triennium?
Thanks, Chair. So essentially, staff bring a recommendation to me. And if there's an application that can't be accommodated in other the cost centre budgets, then we come back to this. So I only approve them on the basis of staff recommendations. But yes, there is a criteria, and normally you'll find what was the school ones we did here in Tauranga? That was one that we normally participated in.
It's the what's it, the innovation thing where they
The kids.
I can't remember what it's called.
Mm.
But
Yeah, that was last year or the year before, wasn't it, Doug?
It's not hugely material. So there's the normal within. So those schools were within 5,000, but to go above that, what I was wondering what exceptional means. I suppose what makes
Just case by case basis.
And that's why I guess it's called the chairman's discretionary fund, because it's the chairman in their full understanding of the role and responsibilities that the regional council has, and therefore weighing all of that up and making a decision on case by case. You only see the ones that have a yes. There are a number of them that come forward during the year, which the chair and the chief executive look at, which don't fit within that broad criteria of understanding of responsibilities of the regional council. So I suppose that's where the criteria comes in as well, the ones that you don't see because they don't get approved.
any other questions or queries with regard to those three items that were in the chair's discretionary fund? If not, we do have a recommendation to receive this report. Thank you, Andrew. Second, Ron, is any further discussion? I'll put that. All in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Right, now we're on to the biggie. And this is the progress update on the draft annual report for the year end 30 June 2025. And I'd like to welcome both Kamaran and Anton from Audit New Zealand to be here. Initially to present where we're at the moment, issues that may be ahead of us, and how's the whole process travelling. Then the committee may well have, and I'm sure we've got some questions and comments, what we're seeing at the moment.
Chair and members of the committee. This report is to provide the committee with an update on the preparation of the draft annual report for the year ended 30 June 2025. The report essentially provides progress updates on its state of completion to date. It also outlines outstanding management report items from past audits and the status of those items. And as far as management is concerned, in terms of taking action against those, essentially all of the outstanding management report items have been closed bar one, which relates to a review of the procurement policy, which is scheduled as part of this year's work program to be addressed. Also, the report covers a review of the fraud and corruption policy and accompanying standard operating procedures, which has recently been approved by the leadership team, and that's done in line with adherence to Ministry of Justice guidelines as recommended by audit in the previous management reports. And also next steps for that is to look at making staff aware of the new content, the council's commitment to policy objectives in that regard, and steps staff would need to take if there's something they wanted to raise that is of relevance under the policy, and council's response to any items raised in relation to fraud and corruption. Another key process that was also reviewed was the sensitive expenditure guidelines, which has also been approved by the leadership team. And review included changes on clarifying elements of the policies and new sections being added, and also emphasizing the one-up approval principle as part of the policy process. There's also been cross-references to other policies and guidelines, just to give a more holistic view to the reader when reviewing the sensitive expenditure guidelines, and clarifying the relationship between the guidelines and the policy of relevance. The report also covers identification of unrecorded assets, which is part of a continuous improvement process for asset management to the tune of $2.3 million, and that is reflected in the draft annual report. In addition to that, also the report covers an exposure to funding calls for past claims from risk pool in terms of what the current exposure is for 2025 and what the exposure range would be in the future that council would need to consider as part of future planning processes. So attached to the report is the draft report as it pertains to council as parent only. The consolidated figures will come through as we progress through the annual report preparation process, would be presented to council in December for adoption. Also to note, in terms of the non-financial information, we had 3 measures that were reported as unachieved. There was one typo on page 74 of your agenda, or 87 of the report, where there's one measure showing as green, it should be red. So that's just one additional measure that's also not achieved. The draft letter of representation is also included in the attachments, which is in response to a request made in a past committee meeting for the committee to consider. There's some yellow highlights in there in relation to elements that are subject to change as the audit process progresses. And Anton will provide a perspective on that as later on in the session. So as of this date, the interim audit has been completed. Final audit is scheduled for October or next month, with verbal clearance scheduled for the 28th of November. Next steps includes review and finalization of the draft report, oversight and assurance, which is part of the committee considering the report as it stands today, and any considerations in relation to incoming council reviewing and adopting the report in December. The external audit process will continue as of next month, and ultimately one of the things we'll be endeavoring to provide council on adoption is substantive changes between the version that the committee sees today and the final version provided to them in December. So there's a clear, transparent view of how that report has changed through the audit process between now and then. Council adoption on the 10th of December. So that's the essence of the report and key messages there.
Thank you, Kamaran. Anton, did you want to make some commentary now in terms of the process to date and any preliminary findings and how you work through those, etc.?
Tēnā koutou, everybody. Just wanted to say, look, we have completed the interim work. Part of that was also including any sort of expenditure or non-financial measures that relevant up until I think about end of April. So it's not that we haven't done any work to date on that. In terms of the letter of rep, I've just put in a standard letter of rep as it is. The one item I do just want to highlight, which I'd raised in the April, which we'll have include a comment on here, is because of greenhouse gases, even though it's not a material measure, there's a standard emphasis on matter that all the councils that have greenhouse, or all entities that have greenhouse gases, that there's we just highlight that it's still an ongoing process to refine the science behind that.
Just on that, does that include the subsidiaries?
So we're still going to work through with KPMG on the group stuff. I do know that the port as a FMA, a listed entity, has to do reporting. So if it's clear on their side, that's okay. But it's just, our work will be focused on the parent stuff.
Thank you for that. Commentary, questions from the committee? Bruce.
Thank you, Stuart. And look, just for the record, I've invited Matt to meet with me afterwards. I've got probably a few, and Kamaran, you'd be welcome to, a few items just to raise, and I don't think I would want to worry the committee today with what I might or might not have spotted. So we'll do that. We'll do that later, because actually I think obviously you've highlighted the stuff that still has to come in here, Matt and Kamaran. I get that, and that'll be a process through. So it's great, actually, Stuart, that we have a chance to look at it, and I appreciate the chance later this afternoon just to raise a few points. For what it's worth, for the for the floor of the committee, none of them are significant or material. They at best are suggestions for changes. They're not of any substance whatsoever at all. In fact, I wouldn't even expect them to be shown and as highlighted as changes, I suspect, Kamaran, in the way that you've hinted at. Look, I did ask for the letter of rep, Kamaran, so I probably should, Stuart, just address that really quickly. I'm conscious that actually the representations that are required in that letter are substantial, Stuart, on what now is going to be a post-election time when, as we're recognising, there'll be some changes going on in council, including a new chair. And the chair is going to be asked to sign letter of representation along with Fiona as the chief executive. So I wondered, Stuart, without dwelling on any particular point, are we comfortable with what we know today that letter can be signed? And when you look at the letter, it does actually, it says, to the best of our endeavour, we are reflecting the transactions as we see them. We are reflecting our performance as we see them. But he goes on to say we've maintained levels of control. There has been an absence of fraud, and it's not overly relevant here, but even indeed, we're representing that we're a going concern. So all I was wanting to reflect that for this meeting as the outgoing committee in the triennium, that as best as we know at this stage, there's no reason that should not be signed. And Matt, perhaps I could ask you at the start, what is the process that you go through? I presume there's a level of management process for enabling this letter to be signed.
Thank you, Bruce. I think one of the important points will be the conclusion of the audit. So until the audit has been fully completed and all matters have been considered by management and audit, the letter isn't ready yet to be signed.
That's right.
So as Anton said, they're up to a certain stage and we're confident with that information, but the completion of the audit in October will give that confidence to the incoming council to be able to sign in December.
Thank you. I noticed also that we do have an important point later on in terms of legislative compliance, Stuart, which will be valuable as some of the underpinning that this committee can take confidence on in terms of, for instance, having a view about that we haven't complied with legislation, etc. So look, yeah, I don't see any reason why this letter couldn't be signed at this stage, but I think it's important that we have on record that at this point it's tracking the right way, that this should not cause us any problem. And indicated, Anton, at this stage, this is the letter. I'm taking from your perspective, there's no indication at this stage you would be looking for any particular level of representation other than the standard from the region.
Yes, at this stage, until we get into the work at final, if something pops up, then we would make changes or add an item. But at this stage, based on all the knowledge I have today, it should be pretty standard and no significant additional representations.
Brilliant. Well, I'm comfortable for that. We are a long way from actual sign-off. So, Stuart, I would be interested ultimately in things like, I notice at this stage that we've maintained our accounting policies. So the way we measure and we measure and report things haven't changed. And I take it that's what we are continuing with right through until the 10th of December. I'm always interested a bit closer to the time, and obviously today is not the day on that one, Kamaran, particularly around our contingencies, whether we have provided correctly for the right stuff, those sorts of things that measure our performance, which becomes really important. But I sense we need to leave that for a later entity, or sorry, a new council to deal with at this stage. Thank you for giving me the time to talk.
Thank you. So we've got Titaru, then Kevin.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yeah, my matter relates to matters that stem from 2025 and are before the Office of Auditor General right now, that have really regarding lots of spurious claims made quite publicly, I would think, around our behaviours and matters related to our audit behaviour, our financial behaviours here in the council. Matters that have been quite personalised in many respects, and I just wonder what is the journey for that particular situation, given that we're auditing risk and ready to sign off on different matters. I can't detail it because I don't want to mention names. Just want to say that there's been some really fiery comments made about 15 to 20 times coming across our emails as members of the council, which is really, really uncomfortable. And in context of finalising an audit position, I would certainly like to know where we are at with the Office of Auditor General in that particular space.
Okay, yep, no problem. I can answer that. So that is actually being handled by the Office of the Auditor General, not Audit New Zealand per se. We seem like we won, but there's glass walls. They're working through that in Wellington. However, we have committed to doing some work as part of the audit to help address some of queries that the Office of the Auditor General has asked us to do to address some of those concerns. So as of today, there's not much more I can give you on that. But as the office carries on working through information in the background, that they will advise us or the council directly with what the outcomes are of that matter.
Thank you. Councillor Winters, Kevin.
Hi, Stuart. Morning, everyone. Can I just comment on page 48, Stuart, significant achievements? Little bits based around Rotorua. So I just want to pick up the fourth bullet point, the increased investment in regional safety and rescue. Can we add in there too, Mr. Chairman, that we are supporting the Rotorua First Response mountain biking to the tune of, and I don't know how much it is, Matt, but it's significant. I think it's about 80k a year. Can we add in Rotorua First Response, first aid? And secondly, it's just grammatical change around in the joint funding agreement, Matt, with the Crown and Rotorua Lakes Council and ourselves putting in extra 4.6 million. I sort of, you gave me a heart attack, Matt, when I saw the 4.6 million, thinking we were putting it all in, but then I carried on reading and it's only an extra million. Can we add in there that we're actually putting in a total of 1.75 into the Tarawera Surge Scheme? It just needs a little tweak in grammar to avoid confusion to the person reading it, Matt. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Winters. Yeah, the team are making a note of that, and absolutely, we want to make it as clear as possible, so we'll make those amendments.
Yep.
And I added up, at the end of the agenda, I added up the funding for the regional safety and rescue, and this is probably one of Bruce's things, but I'll do it now. We're giving 350 to Surf Life Saving, 200k to Coast Guard, and I don't know what the figure is for land search and rescue, but can we have a breakdown in that narrative as well as what each organisation is getting per annum?
to make up the 628. Thank you.
Yes, we'll make those amendments. Thank you, councillor Winters.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a few things. First, just to echo the deputy chairperson's comments about the importance of the letter of representation. I remember 3 years ago arriving here and thinking, how in the world can I sign off the annual report when I only just arrived 3 minutes ago? And then when I look at, we discovered $2.3 million worth of assets that we didn't know about. And I'm thinking, well, that sounds like a lot of money. It's more than I've got in my bank account. So how did that happen? And it's not a lot in terms of our total assets, but I'll be interested to know in the context of what controls we have, which the letter of representation says we have, and yet we didn't know we had these assets. So in terms of the quality of that letter of representation and the stuff that goes into it, that's, if I was going to be new again next time, that would be a question I'd be asking and seeking some real reassurance on. So I'll just leave that there because it's something for you to consider. But I am interested in knowing how come we lose a couple of $1 million worth of assets.
Mr. Chair, so that's part of the revaluation and asset management process. So it's not uncommon for what they term as found assets to be discovered across the sector. And that's just because of the scale and scope of assets being deployed and commissioned over time. These are long life assets that span multiple years. And there are times where when they're commissioned, they through process may not have been recorded, and through subsequent revaluation processes get picked up. And this is just part of the ongoing continuous improvement process that councils do across the sector. So the 2.3 million in the context of council's total asset base is quite small and immaterial. There have been assets found in the past, and this is just, again, trying to get that complete picture as the asset management improvement journey continues. So not an uncommon practice, but also a reflection of continuous improvement as opposed to significant gaps in the size of the asset base and knowledge of that.
Yeah, except that it's a small percentage. So just understand it's not to do with revaluations or anything like that, but possibly about whether something was recorded having been commissioned from when it changed to a project in progress to a project in existence.
And that comes through either through the revaluation process when there's a reconciliation of what's on record versus what's physically inspected, or through condition assessments as part of the asset management program, where those discrepancies would be picked up.
Anton, you find that acceptable?
Yeah. Look, in the ideal world, there will never ever be this situation, but sometimes it does happen just due to this pure size of the base of assets. So it does happen, but obviously we don't want it to be material. I haven't worked through this particular asset matter now, but for context, the lower materiality is 5.1 million for this audit, and for asset materiality, we're looking at 43.9 million. So that's what we're working with if it's material. So based on the numbers until we've actually done the audit work on it, it doesn't appear a material issue, but if it, it's had to start getting, higher than these other numbers I've mentioned, then that would become a worry.
Just, look after your cents and you'll find your dollars. Next one is on page 51 in Diligent, and can't quite see the number of it, but it's under the KPIs number 7, which is we seek to provide nature-based solutions to appropriately enhance the environment. And when I look at the examples given, we've got a stock bank and a spillway, which don't seem to be particularly nature-based in the way I understood, but as examples. That's page 51 in Diligent. I can't quite see what it is in the page 64 in the printed document. Page 21. There's so many page numbers. So KPI number 7.
Kamaran, that would be a label
goals,
from
sorry.
the long-term plan?
Correct.
So they're descriptions from the adopted long-term plan.
Yeah, that's part of your framework.
The goals there, but the examples don't seem to be particularly nature-based.
So we can have a look at that, those examples, and see if there's a more appropriate fit for that.
The other thing is on, and just for information, I think, but I'll be interested to see, which is about on page 70 on Diligent. It's a performance, it's probably something for me to flag for when we do our KPIs. It's about having as a target percentage of budget spent, which encourages to spend budget, but doesn't actually encourage necessarily good spending. So it's really just flagging for when we come to do the setting our next KPIs, whether we look at that. So I just want that as an action recorded somewhere so we don't forget. And then the final one is on page 82. It's particularly regarding transportation, but it's in every classification. Just interested in working out how the internal charges and overheads are applied. So under transportation, there has been a huge jump from what was planned to what ended up as the actual 3 times wages and overheads ended up being applied from the transportation classification. Just interested in knowing how that's calculated, because transportation has become much more of a percentage of what we do, or is there some other driver for that?
So Kamaran, while AJ is looking up, maybe you could explain generally how the overheads are recovered and allocated to activities, including general and targeted rates activities.
So for different activities, overheads, depending on the nature of the overheads, they would be applied on a particular basis, FTE counts, number of hardware, equipment. So there's different bases for which overhead costs are allocated across the business for different activities. This particular cost would be a reflection of that allocation methodology.
Just a bit of a flag.
Can I just clarify for you? Because
I'll just ask my question because you might answer it, which is, so is this an indication of something we should have been keeping an eye on in terms of how overheads have been increasing?
it says it's payment for staff and suppliers. So that's the bus contracts as well. And we were expecting it to go to 60 million from 44, 44 to 60, but it actually only went to 45. And that's because central government through the NZTA didn't fund several of our growth projects that we wanted to move to. And we didn't feel that ratepayers could afford to do it on their own. And so it's not that we didn't cut any work out in the transport field, but we didn't expand. Like the 10-year plan had planned to go from 44 million over the 10 years to 100 million. Now that's been because of lack of government funding as a co-funder. That's been addressed quite strongly by the transport team. So they've done a good job there, Ron. It's not staff wages, it's the contracts that are affected, and they're getting some very good savings in that.
That's not the number I'm looking at. So it went from the number I'm looking at, charges and overheads went from 1.5 to 3 million. So it doubled the bottom line of that section. So, but the staff and suppliers only went up by $1 million and out of 44 to 45. So that seems to be, the ratio seems to have changed quite dramatically.
Yes, you're quite right, Councillor Scott. AJ?
That's right. And Councillor Scott, overheads are based charged to the activities based on the number of employees. And if you can see, for instance, payment to staff and suppliers, a chunk of that in terms of what in the LTP we planned for staff increases had a certain number of employees allocated to that activity that then drove the overhead that's been charged to that activity. The actual numbers are lower than that, and that's why you will see that the number of the amount of overhead allocated to this activity is lower compared to what was in the LTP.
Yeah,
When you
1.5 million to 3 million. Transportation on page 95.
May I step in for a second? I just want to highlight that we need to compare year one of the LTP to the actual. So the actual comparison there is 4.7 compared to 3.1 million.
Something happened in that 3 years where so do we know what that was? Was that because it wasn't the contract changed, something else changed that we wanted to double our staffing in that area?
But in the previous LTP, transportation, like Councillor Ron Doddleson mentioned, did have this very significant project work that they plan to do. And if you that's why the LTP had a lot of increases in staff planned. But actually what happened, that's why we're looking at year one LTP, which was the last LTP approved, compared to year three of the previous LTP before that. So in the last LTP that we approved, 2034, there was a lot of additional work that transportation wanted to achieve through NZTA funding and other projects.
That's also a reflection of the set of assumptions that would have been applied in the 2131 LTP, which will be quite different from what's in the current LTP. And it's reflecting that dynamic shift in assumptions and the operating environment.
Suggest that you just send a note around, because that's a fair question. Just send a note around explaining, the timing, the activity, change of resource, etc., just so we're all clear. Anything else, Ron? Are there any other questions or queries around that? If not, look, thank you for where you're at the moment. And we certainly look forward, or the new council would look forward to the final of this. It's a really important issue. It's a big project. We appreciate that. And again, Anton, thank you for you and your team, the way you're approaching it as well. I'm sure the relationship is, as usual, working very well and strongly. So, members, look, we have a recommendation which looks to receive this update. Moved by Andrew, second by Titaru. Any other questions or queries? If not, I'll pop that. All in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Kevin. Well done. The next item is the expenditure and koha report for the year end, and it's there for our perusal in terms of all what has been released, in terms of also the guidelines. Are there any questions or queries first before we make any recommendations? Or do you want to talk about that? Or?
Just to highlight, Mr. Chair, there's a confidential appendix as well that also has information relating to this. So if there are any items on the confidential item, that will have to be discussed in confidence.
If not, is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you, Bruce. Second chair leader. I'll put that. All in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Now we're on to the official information response, compliance and Ombudsman Engagement Annual Report for year end 24-25. 248 on diligent. 261 on the agenda. I'm not sure, Jenny, was a little typo fixed in a summary report? Council.
It's been,
Yeah, we didn't file it. we failed it. So yeah, that'll be changed in the minutes for that. Okay, so here we have, we have Monique. Do you wish to speak to it first?
Well, kia ora, councillors. No, happy to take the report as read. It's really for information only and to update you, but happy to take any questions, of course.
Bruce.
Look, little helpful report. Thank you. Sorry, a helpful, not considered bad, a very helpful report. Thank you. And I was just interested, your mind always, we've dealt with most of them really adequately. Obviously some, or there have been complaints about our provision of information that's been made to the Ombudsman. This strikes me as not a bad result. I mean, I think it's very hard for any local authority to get the Goima right. And indeed very hard to necessarily satisfied. Are you happy, if I can ask you professionally, that 5 seems like a number that's reasonable? We're not out of whack or anything like that?
No, I think I would absolutely agree with that. I think, as you say, some of our responses, and it's more about the way that we manage those, because we aren't in control of the public and how they might react or perceive how we respond to their complaints. But I think overall, in terms of the data that's published by the Ombudsman on a regular basis, where we sit in that is very good.
Is there any opportunity looking at this one and previous ones where we could be more proactive in terms of releasing information, particularly to the media, who rightly so, do Goimas or other interested parties?
In terms of responding to media directly, I'd speak to the comms team about that. That's probably an appropriate channel, and I wouldn't want to speak for them. But in terms of how we're making information available on our website more publicly, that's definitely something that's a work in progress to ensure that we're doing that on a regular basis, and those reviews go both through our team and also the comms team to make sure that we're hitting that right.
Questions or queries? Thanks, Monique. And the team, we have a recommendation on 261 that we receive the report. Thank you, Andrew. Second to Taru. All in favour say aye. Against, carried. So now we have the last one in the open session, which is the internal audit report and update of a range of activities. And welcome, Clive and Steve. Just speak to it first.
Morning, Chair and committee members. Included in the report is an update of our work for 24-25 financial year. We're expecting to complete this program of work by the end of October. The management actions from the past audits reported to the committee continue to reduce, and we have provided explanations for why the outstanding items have not been completed. We take the report as read and will respond to any questions.
Thank you, Clive. And I do note there's a lot more green now than there was earlier in the year. So well done for wrapping up some of those reports and loose ends. Any questions or queries? We have a recommendation. We receive this report. We have a mover for that. Thank you, Ron. Second to Taru. I'll put that. All in favour say aye. Against, carried. Before we go into the public excluded, I do want to acknowledge this is the last meeting of this committee. So to Matt and your team and everyone that's contributed to the reports for this series of agendas, I want to acknowledge the professionalism and the work that's gone into it. Risk and assurance, in my view, is a critical role, particularly for elected members. It's one of our fundamental roles in monitoring the state of the organisation along with some other committees. And from what I've seen, we're on a pathway of constant improvement. You're never there. But I think the contribution of the elected members and Bruce, you as well, have added value to the whole process. So thank you to you all. With that, I'll move that we go into public excluded and we'll wait for the live stream to stop. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Bruce. I'll put that